Sometimes providing power means lending a hand. So Entergy sponsors free tax return assistance and financial education to help our customers take control of their future. Together, we power life. Entergy.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.
Congress is going to want to try to hear from him.
The Mueller investigation is complete, but the case is far from over.
We've lost provosts over the last several years. We've lost top professors.
A call for a big change at LSU.
What's going to happen to all of those sculptures?
The saga of a national folk art treasure. Hi, everyone. I'm Natasha Williams.
And I'm Andre Morrow. Great to have you here. Much more on those top stories in a moment. But first, on this week's edition of SWI, a look at other headlines making news around the state. If you've been noticing a spike in gas prices at the pump this week, you are not alone. Gas prices rose to a 5-year high, according to AAA's gas price calculator, with some drivers paying up to $3.48 per gallon. This marks the 6th straight week of rising prices, but Louisiana's drivers are still paying less than drivers in nearly any other state. Environmental activists from Alaska and Louisiana say the EPA is dragging its heels on issuing rules for oil spill dispersants, and they say they're ready to sue to demand them. They say oil dispersants, like the ones used after the 2010 BP oil spill, create an out-of-sight, out-of-mind situation, but do little to solve any real problems. The agency stopped taking public comments on the issue nearly 4 years ago and has never acted on those comments. EPA oil spill response guidelines were last updated in 1994. Governor John Bel Edwards announced as many as 500 new jobs are expected to come to Lafayette as home health company LHC Group expands its Acadiana headquarters. Company CEO Keith Myers says the expansion will meet a growing demand for in-home care. The expansion is set to triple the size of the company's current Lafayette home. After years of delays, Louisiana's first youth lockup facility has opened in Bunkie. The Acadiana Center for Youth is part of the state's new therapeutic care model for juvenile criminal justice reform. The state stopped trying 17-year-olds as adults for nonviolent crimes just last month. Those minors will now be sent to centers focused on rehabilitation, therapy, and community. Louisiana has found a provider for its unusual plan to increase access to hepatitis C drugs for Medicaid patients and prisoners. A Gilead Sciences subsidiary will provide the state with unlimited access to a generic hepatitis C medication for 5 years. In that time, officials hope to treat as many patients as it can rather than pay per patient, which would cost more. The subscription model plan is the first of its kind in the nation.
Robert Mueller has completed the Russia investigation and delivered a report to the Justice Department. Mr. Mueller concluded there was no collusion between President Trump and his campaign team. He stopped short of rendering a decision about the presidency, possibly obstructing justice. I sat down with a former prosecutor from Louisiana to answer questions about the 22-month investigation and what happens now. 500 search warrants, 500 witnesses, 2,800 subpoenas, and nearly a 2-year investigation into Russia interference in the 2016 election is now over, or is it? Special Counsel Robert Mueller's finding no collusion, but
We learned that there was indeed Russian interference. I don't think there was any big doubts about that before, but this investigation, which was a pretty thorough investigation, concluded pretty solidly that there was Russian interference on two different fronts. Both hacking of Democratic candidates and their and operatives' emails, as well as engaging in a pretty substantial propaganda social media campaign. So you know, we kind of knew about that, but this report confirms that.
Don Caju is a former U.S. attorney, congressman, and state representative. He earned his law degree from Georgetown University and has spent more than 20 years as a civil and criminal lawyer. We asked the former prosecutor about the 4-page summary of Mueller's investigation by Attorney General William Barr, the Trump appointee and top U.S. law enforcement officer. Are you satisfied with AG Barr's summary?
Well, I don't know if anybody's satisfied with Attorney General Barr's summary at this point, from the sense that I think everybody wants to know more, correct? Certainly, I mean, I'm glad he summarized it. Certainly, I'm glad to hear that the president did not collude.
But what about the obstruction of justice? Did the president overstep? Some say on that issue, the special counsel punted.
And instead of making a typical prosecutorial decision on whether to indict or decline indictment, I'm going to just set out the facts on both sides and let you decide, or let someone decide. And Attorney General Barr, with consultation with Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein, as well as the Office of Legal Counsel, came to the conclusion that obstruction didn't occur. I don't think that ends the question.
Caju says there are even questions about the investigation itself. What was it supposed to do?
We don't know what the scope of the special counsel's investigation really was. And that's going to be, I think, very important for Congress to sort of delve into. What were the parameters that were set forth in this investigation from the beginning? Was it just limited to Russian interference with the election? Did they say to make a recommendation on obstruction? And were there other areas that were sort of off limits?
Caju says some would argue from the very beginning Mueller's hands appeared to have been tied.
He specifically says, look, I looked at the evidence in the Russian investigation and say, no, you don't have a crime here. Mm-hmm. But on the obstruction of justice, he leaves it open, which seems to suggest that maybe he did think that there was a crime, but because of the department policy of no indictment of sitting presidents, perhaps that was one reason he didn't make a recommendation. I think he thought he was doing what he was tasked to do from the special counsel standpoint.
If there's no collusion, there's so many contacts between the Russians and President Trump and his campaign. Why did so many of them, lie about it? Why did so many of them break the law?
Well, apparently some of these guys did, have some serious contacts with the Russians. They lied. I think the crimes that most of these guys have either pled guilty to or still under indictment for, don't deal directly with relating with the Russians. But we definitely see evidence that they were dealing with the Russians.
In his summary, Attorney General Barr does write, while this report does not conclude the president committed a crime, it also does not exonerate him, that leading to even more questions. Why didn't Mr. Mueller talk to the president in person?
Well, I think he wanted to talk to the president in person. I think he felt constrained in terms of subpoena power. I think he just did not want to create that sort of constitutional dilemma, and decided to give written questions. So he did submit written questions.
But will the public ever see the president's answers to those questions, or the lengthy confidential report itself, said to be as many as 700 pages?
Mr. Barr said he would like to release as much of the report as possible, subject to Rule 6E and subject to any ongoing investigations. So, he didn't say this, but certainly it would be subject to any kind of national security interest.
Mr. Barr says he plans to release portions of the report in weeks, not months. And with dozens of open investigations still going on, it appears to be far from over. Although 34 people have been indicted in this case, Special Counsel Mueller says he doesn't plan on issuing any more. And for many Americans, that might be the best news.
I think there is a certain amount of fatigue there. Obviously, this was a significant investigation, and I think it's worth, doing some analysis of how the decisions were made, how the investigation was undertaken. So, I think that has to occur. But yeah, I do believe that at some point we have to say, look, yeah, you may not like what the president did and how he conducted his affairs in this area, but that may be for the electorate to decide as opposed to a justice issue.
One thing is clear, and Kaju believes on this we can all agree. We must keep Russia out of our elections.
We can't use the term wake-up call because I think that's already happened. The intelligence community has already come out very strongly that the Russians have interfered. But this needs to be another call to action, and really to make sure that we protect the integrity of our electoral process.
President Trump is still being investigated in a separate case in New York where prosecutors say he directed his personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, to illegal hush money payments to two women as a way to quash a potential sex scandal during the campaign. The New York prosecutors are also looking into Mr. Trump's inaugural fund.
As LSU is announcing a $1.5 billion endowment campaign, the most ambitious in state history, the former head of the state's higher education board is calling for LSU President F. King Alexander to be removed. Baton Rouge business tycoon, civic leader, and philanthropist Richard Lipsey spells out his reasons in an opinion piece blog that has now been read, he says, by well over 100,000 people.
99% of the alumni or people in the state of Louisiana agree with me. It's time for a change.
Richard Lipsey, recent chair of the State Board of Regents and seen in this TEDx talk at LSU last year, blasts Alexander for his lack of leadership on recent athletic controversies, scandals within the Greek system, and new holistic admission policy. His opinions are spelled out in his Put Louisiana First website and blog. His call to clean house also includes athletic director Joe Oliva. He blames both Alexander and Oliva for how they botched a courtship to hire Jimbo Fisher as head football coach 4 years ago, and how they've handled the suspension of basketball coach Will Wade.
There is only one answer. We have a practically new board of supervisors. Several new members have been appointed in the last 2 years, and there's still 3 or 4 board of supervisors from the old administration. They need to get their heads together. They need to sit down. They need to analyze what has gone on and why it has happened. And I think they will realize that leadership starts at the top, and we need new leadership.
Lipsey says had someone with experience been in charge, LSU's Greek system scandals could have been prevented.
How does the Greek system survive at LSU for the last 100+ years, and then all at once it falls apart in the last couple of years?
He cites payments of $400,000 to a faculty member for work that a state audit shows was never performed, and says there are other examples of mismanagement.
The evidence that we've been able to identify over the last couple of weeks of the things that have gone wrong at LSU, the people that work for LSU that did not bother to get to become residents of Louisiana, and we're still digging into that. I think that we haven't gotten to the bottom of that yet.
Of the many bottom lines, Lipsey says LSU's stature as a university, as a flagship, is being diminished because of Alexander's poor leadership.
And what's happened just most recently, when I really got involved, was last fall, when the leadership at LSU announced that it would no longer require certain grade point averages and certain ACT tests. They would do it more on a holistic admissions entrance.
Lipsey goes back to a lesson he learned from his father many years ago.
My dad taught me when I took over my business almost 50 years ago, that controls. You have to have controls. You have to know who's writing the checks. You have to know who's opening the mail. You have to know who's depositing the money. You have to have people that you are confident in, that if you were to leave tomorrow, your business could carry on. And we don't have that at LSU right now.
I made calls to several of the Board of Supervisor members, including new board chair James Williams, but have not gotten any responses. Also requested interviews with Alexander and the governor, but also no responses.
OxyContin maker Purdue Pharma will pay $270 million to settle litigation with Oklahoma over the drug maker's role in opioid deaths in the state. $200 million of that settlement will go toward creating an addiction research center at Oklahoma State University, although critics believe victims should have been able to have their day in court. Purdue Pharma, the maker of OxyContin, and its owners, the Sackler family, agreed to pay $270 million to avoid going to court over the company's role in the opioid addiction epidemic that has killed more than 200,000 Americans over the past 2 decades. The payment negotiated to settle the case brought by the state of Oklahoma was far larger than 2 previous settlements Purdue Pharma had reached with other states. It could jolt other settlement talks with the company, including those in a consolidated collection of 1,600 cases overseen by a federal judge in Cleveland. Purdue appears to have decided that it's less risky to settle the Oklahoma case than to have the allegations publicly aired against it during a televised trial and face exposure to what could have been an astronomical jury verdict. Attorneys for dozens of Louisiana plaintiffs who filed suit in St. Tammany Parish had this to say, and I quote, "The Oklahoma settlement is a step toward widespread recognition of what the opioid industry has done to America and a scratch on the surface of compensating for the harm done," said opioid justice team attorney David Domina.
This month is known for college basketball's March Madness. It is also Problem Gambling Awareness Month. A national nonprofit that supports treatment programs says in March, calls to their hotline increase an average of 40%. This month, Louisiana Public Square examines the pros and cons of legalizing sports betting in our state.
Sports betting, the way that I have always described it, is that it's nothing more than an amenity to cut off the ability of Mississippi and Arkansas and the Indian casinos to cherry pick our gamblers. We're still going to have the problems that everybody's mentioning with problem gamblers. The problem we have now is they go to Mississippi, and when they come back here, we have to treat them. Bad people are going to do bad things, no matter as many laws as you pass and as many rules. You know, I can't tell you that nobody's going to ever try to bribe a basketball player, but it exists right now. It existed whenever the Tulane scandal was, before we had regulated gaming in the states.
Our pastors know what is happening because these people are coming and we're having to use our benevolence funds, our clothes closets, our food pantries to help these fragmented families that result from problem gambling in our state. And we've got to address that. If we don't think about that, and if we don't put our arms out and say, we've got to stop, we're going to create a horrible situation that we'll never get away from. And as far as children gamblers, we're already at about an average of 40% from the 6th grade up that are engaged in gambling somehow right now. We've got to find solutions to that.
Sports betting is a very interesting topic right now in Louisiana. I think Louisiana, there are a lot of factors that make it of a lot of interest to people, at least going by how much feedback I get whenever I write about it. A lot of people in Louisiana are big sports fans between the Saints, Pelicans, LSU. Also, there is that element of Mississippi has it, why can't we? And so I think that there's going to be a big push, but again, after having watched consistent, fights over the budget, and every time you end up with, even if it's a small pocket of money, everybody has their designs on it. And so I think that that's really where we're going to see some of the tension come up during the session is where should the money be dedicated to, if it's dedicated to anywhere, and how people kind of square that all out.
To your point of mobile, or one of the problems there's mobile now in the state. Unfortunately, it's illegal. In our research, we found that there's over 100 websites in the state that you can go onto right now, typing in Louisiana sports betting, and place bets in offshore accounts. So that is a concern always for us, because realistically, we have no authority to go to Antigua or any of these other countries that may be having these websites for us to regulate. So Whether the legislature goes to a mobile or not mobile, unfortunately right now it is something that's here that we cannot regulate.
What are the odds? Sports betting in Louisiana re-airs this Sunday at 11 a.m. on LPB. You can also view it as well as additional interview content online at lpb.org/public square.
When bricklayer Kenny Hill was evicted from his property in Chauvin in the winter of 1999, the fate of his mysterious sculpture garden that he had built was in jeopardy.
Well, today it has been voted as one of the 12 most spectacular gardens in the world. LPB's Charles Jones has the report.
Chauvin, Louisiana. This small fishing community just south of Houma on Highway 56 comes alive every spring for the blessing of the fleet when the shrimp boats float down Bayou Petit Caillou to celebrate the upcoming shrimping season. However, there's one particular point of interest that each of these boats pass by, a brick lighthouse covered with unique folk art standing at 45 feet tall. This is the most recognizable piece at the Chauvin Sculpture Garden.
Me and Dennis Saporsky were going down to LumCon because we were getting ready to teach a course, a photography course. And on the way down, you could see this place, and I had stopped and looked at it before. So I said, Dennis, I want to show you this place.
I went down to see it, met Kenny Hill, talked to him for about an hour about his work, and found out that Mr. Hill was being evicted from the property for past due bills, not maintaining the property, and luckily I got to talk to him about his creation that he had made over a 12-year period, the sculpture garden that he had built himself, by himself.
Kenny Hill, the genius behind the garden, started to construct these sculptures in the very early 90s and was very mysterious about it during the building process.
Mr. Julius, who was a shrimper who lived next door, would greet you and tell you it's okay, you can go and look around. Kenny did not want to speak to the public about it. He wanted the artwork to speak for itself. We could see Kenny had a little trailer that he lived in, and you could see him looking out of the window, watching folks as they looked around the garden.
After being evicted in the winter of 1999 for various reasons, Kenny Hill disappeared, leaving the garden's future in jeopardy.
Dennis was very interested. He said, what's going to happen to all of those sculptures? He's no longer renting the land. They could just fall into disrepair. This would be a real tragedy. So he approached the Kohler Foundation of Wisconsin, and they often gift folk art sites to communities, and that ended up working out.
I'm from Wisconsin. I had worked at Kohler as a high school graduate, college student in their factory.
And so when we talk about who sort of looks after the garden, there's really two groups. There's Nicholls State University, and officially at Nicholls State University there's the art department, there's the Center for Bayou Studies. Both of those groups help to sponsor activity here. But then there's the advisory group, and that's called the Friends of the Chauvin Sculpture Garden.
The Friends of the Garden have also written grants that provides funds for a docent program.
It's docents like these, such as Billy Babin, who walk folks through the garden during their visit. When we met Billy, she demonstrated just how powerful and innovative this garden and its creator is.
Kenny left these. When he left the garden, they were just like this. We did not finish them because this gives us an example of how the other ones are made with this rebar and chicken wire.
And we have more angels. I'm sensing a lot of heavy religious symbolism.
Yes. He was raised in a religious household.
I think that he was raised in the Pentecostal faith, and you see a lot of biblical imagery here, yet it's almost different. A lot of it's different than what you usually would see in your Bible.
It wasn't long before I was making my own inferences about the themes of the garden.
They're going through some kind of struggle of some sort, and then they go underneath this archway, and it's, now they're, kind of I say normal people, but being guarded by the angels.
Okay, so kind of going through that fits in with the theme of redemption, so to
Right.
speak. Although many people try to decipher what Kenny was trying to say, the truth is that it's up to the viewer, because Kenny certainly never said.
Maybe one man's journey and everyone plugging into the concept of life as a journey. It has both a universal and a autobiographical significance. Autobiographical for Kenneth Hill and then a universal significance for everybody else.
Kenny did say a few things. He's on record for saying he made this garden for the community. So I think he wanted to share it. He also said that it was about things that he learned in his life. He said it was about living.
And one of the most amazing things about the garden, Kenny Hill refused to make a profit.
And I said, have you ever sold a piece to make money? Because he needed money. He said, if I sell a piece of artwork, I lose my ability to create.
Words and pictures don't do it justice. Everyone agrees that one needs to visit the garden to take it all in.
I think the visit to the garden, the actual visit to the garden, is an experience. And you can read about it, you can photograph it, but no one picture, no one text is going to capture everything.
For Louisiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Charles Jones.
This year's Blessing of the Fleet will pass by the Sculpture Garden and its Folk Art Festival on Sunday, April 7th.
Lots of food and music.
It'll be a great time for everyone. That is our show for this week, everyone. Remember, you can watch LPB On Demand on your phone or tablet with our LPB Anywhere app.
The download is free from our app store. You can catch LPB news and public affairs shows and other Louisiana programs that you've come to love over the years. And please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
For all of us at Louisiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Andre Mora.
And I'm Natasha Williams.
Thanks for watching. Until next time, that's the state we're in.
Sometimes providing power means lending a hand. So Energy sponsors free tax return assistance and financial education to help our customers take control of their future. Together, we power life. Energy.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.